You've probably heard this sentence from politicians on every side of the aisle and never stopped to question it. This spending will boost the economy. It is usually presented like a law of physics. Pull the lever marked spend, and growth comes out the other side. More government money in, more prosperity out. No catch and no fine print. But believed without question, it can talk entire countries into decades of stagnation and convince entire generations that $1 trillion bill has no consequences. This assumption thrives because, for a while, it can look perfectly true. But when a country treats the act of spending as identical to the creation of wealth, it often ignores the mounting costs until they become impossible to manage. There is a real economic theory used to justify this political promise: the fiscal multiplier. The mechanism works like this. When the government spends $1, that dollar becomes someone's paycheck. That person spends part of it at a local store, and the store owner uses it to restock and pay their own employees. The money cycles round and round, theoretically generating more than $1 of total activity. It is an elegant idea, but most economists agree it requires very specific conditions to work: a deep recession, idle factories, and a central bank that has already cut interest rates to zero. The danger begins when this theory is detached from those specific emergencies and used to justify spending more, always, no matter the state of the market. A tool designed to keep the floor from falling out during a crisis becomes a destructive weapon when turned into a permanent political strategy. To see how this plays out, we look to Japan in the mid-1990s. The country's massive property and stock market bubbles had just burst, and the economy was beginning to stall. The government's response was aggressive, unleashing a string of massive stimulus packages, including one worth roughly 6% of the entire country's GDP. But the customers never followed the money. An electronics shop owner in Osaka might watch construction crews pave a brand new road right outside her door, but her business remained slow because the underlying problem was never a lack of roads. Between 1992 and the early 2000s, Japan poured money into highways, bridges, and public works, often in remote places that didn't urgently need them. The results speak for themselves. Annual growth, which had been 4%, averaged little more than 1% during this stretch. Meanwhile, the national debt climbed until it reached well over double the total annual economic output. There is still debate over whether this spending prevented a full-scale depression or simply papered over a broken banking system that couldn't get credit flowing again. But Japan proved that massive spending does not guarantee a boom. Instead, it left the nation with a mountain of debt that is still being paid down today. Fast forward to the United States in March 2021. As the economy climbed out of the pandemic, the government signed the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. In the short term, the stimulus checks kept households afloat and businesses breathing. Unemployment fell quickly, and on the surface, it looked like the multiplier had delivered exactly what the textbooks promised. Then came the part the textbooks often leave out. Within months, inflation began to spike, eventually reaching its highest rate in 40 years. This chart shows the drivers of that spike. While supply chain chaos played a role, Federal Reserve researchers land on a meaningful slice, between 2 and 3 percentage points of inflation, that was directly attributable to the stimulus spending. This outcome was predicted. Experts like Larry Summers warned before the bill passed that the package was several times larger than the economy needed. Other economists argue the trade-off was worth it, claiming that a bit of inflation was a fair price to pay for ensuring the economy reached full strength quickly. Both sides have a point, but the experiment proved that stimulus is never a consequence-free cure. The U.S. got a fast recovery and a generational inflation crisis in the same package. The reality is that government spending can work in the right size and at the right time. The deception lies in the part that gets left out of political speeches, the opportunity cost. It is the false promise that trillions of dollars can be directed by the state without any risk or long-term trade-off. It relies on the fallacy that more is always better, ignoring the point where the economic cure becomes more expensive than the original disease. Japan ended up with a debt mountain instead of a boom, and America triggered record inflation. Both happened because policymakers ignored the inevitable mathematical cost of the multiplier. When debt levels become a concern, politicians often pivot to a final defense, the idea that we can simply grow our way out of debt, just like we did after World War II. But those post-war years were unique. The world needed physical rebuilding from the ground up. A massive new generation was entering its prime working years, and decades of technological catch-up were all landing at once. Those were once-in-a-century tailwinds. Banking on a similar miracle to quietly erase today's debt is a desperate gamble rather than a repeatable plan. Next time a politician promises spending will boost the economy, the right question to ask is, under what specific conditions, at what cost, and who holds the bill when it comes due? Without those specific answers, the promise of the multiplier moves out of the realm of data and into the territory of a sales pitch.